Welcome to Harvey's Huddle. I'm Jackson Harvey. Welcome to week 14 in the NFL. Got lots to talk about today. Not a ton to talk about. It's not going to be 45 minutes like some of those other episodes that I've had, but going to stick with the shorter layout today. Talk about the top 10 teams in the NFL, and we're going to be looking at a few games here that I think are the best games of the week as well. The most competitive, everything around that. So, just want to mention, I had a great week last week watching all these games and seeing all the results. I even ended up getting one result exactly right. Minnesota and Jacksonville, 24-21. Didn't predict the overtime game, but pretty proud of that. I went 13-2 last week with all my predictions, and I'm 52 for 21 on this season, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I don't know if y'all want to share that around, because I feel like I'm a genius, and I think people need to understand that I'm a genius. Go check out my Instagram, at Harvey's Huddle. I'm going to post all of my predictions there every week, and that's going to include the 3 predictions that I'm going to give in these episodes. I'm hoping as well to get a little fantasy episode going. It'll be like 10 or 15 minutes this week. I know a lot of people are starting their fantasy championship runs in the playoffs this week, or they started last week, or they might even start next week. So we'll take a look at some players that you can snag on your teams to really make a championship run, or if you're like me, make a run in the consolation bracket and feel good about yourself at the end of the season. Let's take a look at my top 10. At number 10, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I didn't have them in my top 10 list last week, but with Lamar Jackson back at the helm and back after his issues, they looked really solid against the Cowboys on Tuesday. Lamar, he didn't have the best throwing game, but all around they played pretty decently. It's not hard to play decently against the Cowboys, which is why I don't have them any higher than 10, but I think they played a good enough game to kick the Colts out of that number 10 spot. At number 9, I've got the Buccaneers. I'm not going to move them from that number 9 spot. I really am not confident in them as a team, and they had a bye week last week, so we didn't get to see Tom Brady throw his 3 interceptions. At number 8, I've got the Seahawks. I don't know what happened with them. I don't know what's going on, but to lose to the Giants and Colt McCoy, not even Danny Dimes, Colt McCoy and the Giants, it's just, I don't know. I don't know how you do that. Giants are looking pretty decent coming down this home stretch. I think they've won 3 or 4 in a row. Their defense is looking solid, but Seattle, they looked lost. I really don't know how they managed to lose that game, but they dropped down a lot because of it. At number 7, I have the Titans. I don't have them moving anywhere because I think they are a good team, and luckily for them, the Seahawks lost pretty bad. So I like the Titans. I think they're an okay team. I don't think they're great. Derrick Henry really got stifled by that Cleveland Browns defense. And the offense really came back in the second half, but not enough to beat Baker Mayfield's 4 touchdowns. The defense needs to get some turnovers. They need to be able to get the ball back for their offense in order for them to be able to do anything. So I got the Titans at 7. At number 6, I've got the overrated Pittsburgh Steelers. I have them falling all the way to 6 because of previous games, not just because of their loss to the Washington football team, but also because of their near losses to the Cowboys and Ravens practice squad, pretty much. So I really don't think their offense is much to talk about. We'll talk about their their Buffalo game later on in the episode. At number 5, I've got the Cleveland Browns. I haven't had them in a top 10 list all season, but I am really loving Baker Mayfield right now. He is playing great football. Again, Cleveland's one of the teams. We'll talk about their games later on, but I think this team is really good. To have a defense stifle Derrick Henry like they did, and to just dominate the way that they did on Sunday, it was great to watch. At number 4, I've got the Green Bay Packers. I really like Aaron Rodgers. Congrats to him. He threw his 400th touchdown pass, I believe, on Sunday to Devontae Adams. They have a good defense as well, and they're a solid football team. At number 3, I've got the New Orleans Saints. Taysom Hill really showed off this week with his arm, not just his legs. He had over 250 passing yards and a couple touchdowns thrown in there as well. I think it really proved that he has an arm to work with. He's not just a running quarterback, but he can really throw the ball as well. They have a great defense too, so I think they're just a great team, and then the top 3 now in the league. At number 2, I've got the Buffalo Bills. I've been asked a couple of questions about this, why I have the Bills higher than the Saints, and I really think the Bills are doing well at really destroying the worst teams. I think that's what makes Pittsburgh fall so much, is that they kept close games against some of the worst teams in the league, whereas the Bills, they came out against San Francisco on Monday night and they blew them out of the water. It was amazing to watch. Josh Allen is playing great football, just like Baker Mayfield. I just think that the Bills are the second best team in the league. I don't see the Saints coming in and beating them the way that they're playing right now. Only downside, they need a better rushing game, which they had a better day on Monday, but they need to be consistent there. At number 1, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Obvious reasons. They're a great team. They struggled a little bit against Denver on Sunday night, but I still think they're an amazing team. They've got the talent to really make another Super Bowl run, and I think they're the best team in the league. I don't see anyone beating them right now. There you have it. That's my top 10 list. Ravens, Bucks, Seahawks, Titans, Steelers, Browns, Packers, Saints, Bills, and then the Chiefs. Let me know what you think on my Instagram or on my Twitter at Harvey_Huddle. I'll ask a question or two about it in the next couple days as well. Let's go on to a few game previews. First, I want to look at a battle for the 3rd wildcard spot in the AFC. The Indianapolis Colts taking on the Vegas Raiders. This is, again, a huge game for control of that number 3 wildcard spot. Vegas can win this, and then they'd obviously hold the tiebreaker against Indianapolis. Or if Indianapolis wins this, they build a 2-game lead over Vegas. Only other team that is involved in that close race is Baltimore right now at 7-5 as well. Indianapolis at 8-4, and Vegas is at 7-5 too. Now, I say that Vegas almost has a playoff spot, but holy cow, I don't know how they came out of that game on Sunday with a win. They've really had a rough couple weeks. They had a blowout against Atlanta, and they had a near loss to the Jets. But Carr, he looked pretty decent on Sunday against New York. He went 28-47, 381 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Their tight end Waller, he had 200 of those 381 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns as well. He was probably the single reason my wife lost in fantasy football on Sunday, but I think he racked up like 48 points total. They were very lucky against the Jets that the recently unemployed Greg Williams decided to send an all-out blitz on the last play of the game. Just a side note, I don't know how he can do that. I don't know how he's paid to throw a game like that, but he's fired anyways. Doesn't really matter. The Raiders defense right now, they're tied for the 3rd fewest sacks in the NFL with 15, and they've allowed the 2nd most rushing touchdowns in the NFL as well with 19. Indianapolis has had a couple of tough games as well the past couple of weeks, but most recently they beat Houston 26-20. Rivers went 27-35 in that game, 285 yards and 2 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton went for 110 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. Their defense over in Indianapolis, they've only allowed 15 passing touchdowns in the season, which is tied for the third least. And they have 13 interceptions, which is tied for the fifth most. The offensive line for the Colts, they've only allowed 15 sacks on the season. So the offense has allowed the same amount of sacks that the defense for the Raiders have gotten all season. So expect Indianapolis to really take over the trenches in this game. And Indianapolis's offense, they're tied for the first most rushing yards per carry with 3.7. I really like Indianapolis here. I think Vegas has been really inconsistent. They've only really played well against the Chiefs in the last few weeks. I think Indianapolis defense, they're going to stiffen up. Josh Jacobs is a beast for the Raiders. I think he should have a good game, but I don't think it'll be enough. I think Indianapolis takes this one 28-17. Now we're going to talk about Pittsburgh taking on the Buffalo Bills. I really did call it, though. I called it. I predicted that Washington was going to beat Pittsburgh, and I predicted a score of 24-17, and it was 23-17, so I was pretty proud about that. Washington really looked good against the Steelers, and that's saying something. Washington's defense is pretty good too, but when you have 6 attempts on the 1 yard line to get into the end zone and you can't do it, something's wrong with your running game, Pittsburgh. And here's what it is. Roethlisberger threw 53 times on Sunday. He went 33 of 53, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. This team had only 13 rushing attempts for 21 yards total on the night. That's all. And that's not including Roethlisberger's 1 attempt at not getting sacked for 0 yards. In the past 5 games, Pittsburgh's thrown the ball 53 times this past game, 51 times against the Ravens, 46 times 3 games ago, 46 times 4 games ago, 42 times 5 games ago. They have the second most passing attempts in the league with 488. And if you're passing 53 times in a game and you just barely have 300 yards and you only have 2 touchdowns and you have an interception in there, something's wrong. And you only have 13 rushing attempts? What's going on? What is going on in Pittsburgh? James Conner has been out. It looks like he's going to be back in this week. But I don't know if it's going to do much. I don't know if Conner is the answer. I think they need to be just all together more committed to the run. Trying to get something going in the running game. Their defense, of course, is really good. I've talked about them a lot. They have the least sacks allowed on offense, by the way, with 10. I think Big Ben hasn't been sacked in the last 5 games, which is phenomenal. Props to the offensive line there. Another thing about their rushing game, though, they have the second most, or their passing game, they have the second most pass attempts in the league, but they have the 5th lowest yards per attempt with 6.4 yards. So every time they throw the ball, the average is 6 yards. That's crazy. If you're passing the ball that much and you're only getting 6 yards per attempt, it's just, I don't get it. I don't get what the offensive coordinator's doing there. Back to the sacks. The offensive line, they've only allowed 10 sacks on the season. And the defense for the Steelers, they have the most sacks in the NFL with 44. That's got to be a record if they keep that going in the last part of this season. I don't know. I don't know if a team's ever had the least sacks allowed and the most sacks on defense in a season. They're good defense with the stats, but they got mangled. Not mangled, but they looked bad against the football team. Let's look at the Bills. Josh Allen, he had a great game. He went 32 for 40, 375 yards, and 4 touchdowns. See, if you're throwing 40-plus times a game, those are the numbers that you should be having, Roethlisberger. Beasley and Diggs, they combined for 222 yards total out of that 375 yards by Allen. Beasley had 130. Diggs had 92. They also added in a touchdown. And out of the 40 attempts, Beasley and Diggs were targeted 21 times. So more than half of Josh Allen's throws are going to Beasley or Diggs, which that's great. Beasley had a great game. Diggs is a great receiver. I don't see Pittsburgh really being able to stop that. The Bills' offense is tied for the 4th most passing touchdowns in the league with 28. They also had the 5th highest quarterback rating in the league with 107.2, and they have the 3rd highest completion percentage with 69.9%. And the only people that are above them are the Seahawks and someone else, but the Seahawks have 70%, so they're basically tied for second. The rushing game needs to continue to be good and consistent this game. I think Singletary had 92 yards last game. No touchdowns. Josh Allen is their leading rusher. He has 5 or 6 touchdowns on the season. So they need to really get a good rushing game going against the Steelers. The football team didn't really have much of a rushing game after Antonio Gibson went down so really in Monday's game, but I think the Bills could really run all over the Steelers' defense, and they can have a really good balanced attack. I really think the Steelers are going to disappoint here. I know Connor's coming back. I don't think it's going to do much against a really good Bills defense. I think Allen is just playing way too well for the Steelers to win this game. I see Josh Allen throwing another 3 or 4 touchdowns, another 300-plus yard game, and I see that the Bills are going to win this one 30-20. Finally, let's take a look at the Cleveland-Baltimore game. This one's the Monday nighter, so a really good game against a couple of good teams. The Browns have a 4-game winning streak right now. I really think that this team is going to win the AFC North. I think Pittsburgh is going to have a downward spiral in this latter part of December, and I think Cleveland is going to win the AFC North and get a number 2 or number 3 seed in the playoffs. Mayfield, he went 25 of 33 against the Titans, 334 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. This guy hasn't thrown an interception in 5 straight games, which is incredible. I know I was ragging on him a little bit because he hadn't thrown a passing touchdown since week 7. He threw one, I think his first one was week 12, but he hasn't thrown an interception in 5 games. I don't care if you're not throwing touchdowns in the kind of games that he was playing. As long as you're not turning the ball over, I would be happy, especially with the way that Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are playing right now. Speaking of Chubb and Hunt, they are still insanely effective, I think. The Browns are number 2 in terms of rushing yards in the NFL with 1,893. Only person above them is Baltimore. The offense has the 5th least passing yards in the NFL, however, with 2,568. And the 6th least completion percentage was 62.8%. I think that a lot of that comes from their 2 games with just terrible weather that happened a couple months ago. Their defense has allowed the 4th most passing touchdowns in the NFL with 25, but they have forced the most fumbles in the NFL with 11. The next closest one is 8. So they have 3 more fumbles than the second place one in the NFL. The Ravens handily beat the Cowboys on Tuesday. Lamar Jackson, he was 12 for 17, 107 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. He added 94 yards on the ground and a touchdown on a 4th and 2, which was pretty fancy. Really bad gap present by the Cowboys there as well, but this Ravens team, I don't think they're confused. I think a lot of people see them as confused, but I think they're just not very well balanced. It's like the Steelers. The Steelers are very heavily committed to the pass apparently, but the Ravens are really committed to this running game, and that's why they have the most rushing yards in the NFL with 2,028. It's hard for them to have a winning formula that way, I think. Especially when your quarterback, when you need him to pass the ball, he's been unable to. They have the most rushes of 20 or more yards with 21 of those, and they also have the third most fumbles in the NFL on offense with 8. That's not a very good sign coming into a game with the team that forces the most fumbles in the NFL. So I expect Lamar to fumble it a couple of times here. Mark Ingram's been pretty ineffective all season. Gus Edwards should have a pretty decent game going. Their defense is mediocre on the Ravens side of the ball. It's not great, but they're not terrible. I really think the Ravens defense is going to struggle against Baker Mayfield and the Browns. They're rolling right now, and if Sunday's any indication, I think they're going to be rolling into the playoffs come January. The offense for the Ravens, they're too one-dimensional for me to be able to do well. I think Myles Garrett is going to have a game that could set him apart for Defensive Player of the Year. I see him getting a sack or two and multiple tackles for losses if the Ravens want to stick with the passing or the running game. Like I said, Lamar's going to fumble it a couple of times. Cleveland's going to win this one pretty handily, I think, 34-17. So those are the 3 games I'm looking at to be the best games of the week. Cleveland taking on Baltimore, Pittsburgh taking on Buffalo, and Indianapolis taking on the Raiders. Let me know what you think. I'm going to post the rest of my predictions later on, including the Thursday night predictions. But yeah, let me know what you think on Instagram at Harvey's Huddle, on Twitter at Harvey_Huddle. I hope you all are having a good holiday season, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Jackson Harvey. This has been Harvey's Huddle. Take care.